Have you ever wondered what life was really like for our grandparents or great-grandparents? We often see old photos and think of a simpler, more romantic time, but the reality was far from the black and white charm we imagine. Everyday life decades ago was slower, quieter, and incredibly demanding. There were no instant solutions, no quick conveniences, and very little room for what we now consider basic comfort. It was a life that required patience, planning, and a level of resilience that's hard to fathom today. Mornings didn't start with the gentle chime of a smartphone alarm. People woke up to natural light, the crowing of a rooster, or the sheer necessity of a new day. Work started on time, and being late wasn't just frowned upon, it could have serious consequences. Households ran on strict schedules because time was directly tied to survival, productivity, and responsibility. There was no hitting the snooze button on life. Think about your last trip to the grocery store. You probably grabbed whatever you felt like eating. Decades ago, shopping for food was a mission. It required planning days in advance, and you bought what was available, not necessarily what you wanted. Seasonal foods completely dominated meals. Want strawberries in December? That was a fantasy for most. Imported products were either incredibly rare or didn't exist at all. The variety was limited, and repetition was just a normal part of eating. You ate what you had, and you were grateful for it. Kitchens were the heart of the home, but they were worlds away from the gadget-filled spaces we have now. Meals were prepared from scratch, with basic ingredients, almost entirely by hand. There were no microwave dinners, no pre-chopped vegetables, no instant anything. Cooking took time, effort, and skills that were carefully passed down through generations, and absolutely nothing was wasted. Leftovers weren't just an afterthought, they were a core part of the next day's meal, reused and repurposed with respect and ingenuity. Our homes today are sanctuaries of comfort. We adjust the thermostat with a tap and enjoy warmth in winter and cool air in summer. But back then, homes were much smaller and far less comfortable. Heating was often limited to a single fireplace or stove, meaning indoor temperatures could be brutally cold. People wore layers of clothing inside their own houses just to stay warm. In the summer, the only relief from the sweltering heat came from open windows and finding a shady spot. Comfort wasn't an expectation, endurance was the reality. And what about a simple hot shower? That was a luxury, not a given. Hot water wasn't always on demand. Bathing followed strict routines, often just once a week, with family members sometimes sharing the same bathwater. Privacy, especially in crowded or shared housing, was a rare commodity. Everyday hygiene required discipline and effort, not the effortless convenience we're so used to. When the day was done, the world grew quiet. Entertainment wasn't at our fingertips. Evenings were for family, for talking, reading a book, or gathering around the radio to listen to a program together. If a family was lucky enough to own a television, it offered only a few channels with limited programming. There was no endless scrolling, no constant stream of notifications, no 24/7 noise to distract from the silence. For children, the world was their playground, quite literally. They spent most of their time outdoors, playing with simple toys or making up games with sticks, stones, and their own imaginations. Childhood was less supervised than it is today, but it was also more physically demanding. Kids learned to be independent from a very young age, and responsibility wasn't something they grew into. It was handed to them early. The classroom was a different world too. School was built on a foundation of discipline, memorization, and obedience. Authority figures like teachers were rarely, if ever, questioned. The goal of education was often to prepare children for a life of conformity and fitting into a structured society, rather than nurturing their individual creativity. It was about learning your place. For adults, work defined identity. Jobs were generally stable, but they were also often repetitive and monotonous. Opportunities for advancement were limited, and personal ambition could easily clash with the rigid systems of the time. People learned to adapt quietly, to keep their heads down rather than trying to stand out. Conversations were more cautious. You didn't just share your opinions with everyone. trust was earned and given selectively. It was a world of unspoken rules. But despite all these hardships and limitations, one thing was incredibly powerful: community. People truly relied on one another. Neighbors weren't just people who lived next door. They were a vital support network. Help was exchanged quietly, without any need for recognition or praise. Small favors, like sharing a cup of sugar or watching a neighbor's child, created intricate networks of survival. This shared hardship built deep, unspoken bonds that held communities together. Celebrations were modest but profoundly meaningful. Birthdays, holidays, and small gatherings were precious escapes from the daily grind. Even when resources were scarce, food was shared generously. Laughter, music, and stories would fill a room, creating powerful memories that lasted far longer than the event itself. These moments of joy were cherished because they were so rare. Life was undeniably harder, but it was also more tangible. You knew where your food came from because you might have grown it yourself. You saw the direct results of your effort. You felt the passing of time in the changing seasons, not just on a digital clock. There was far less choice, but that also meant there were far fewer distractions pulling you in a million different directions. Looking back, it's not about saying life was better or worse. It was just fundamentally different. It demanded patience instead of speed, endurance instead of convenience, and real human connection instead of constant digital stimulation. Understanding the past isn't just about learning dates and famous battles. It's about understanding these ordinary, everyday moments. Because history wasn't lived in grand events, but in the quiet routines of kitchens, classrooms, workplaces, and living rooms. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this glimpse into the past interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about how life used to be. See you in the next video.